The air in the throne room was a blade against the skin, honed sharp by fear. It tasted of polished marble and old power, thick with the silence of 100 petrified courtiers. Elian kept his eyes fixed on the gray stone floor, each step a careful, measured betrayal of the frantic pulse hammering against his ribs. He was a lie, wrapped in the soft wool of a supplicant's tunic, his entire being a performance of fragility. He knelt. The movement was fluid, practiced, a gesture of submission he had rehearsed until it felt like a second skin over his own. Before him, raised on a dais of black basalt, sat the Alpha King. Kale. The name itself was a shard of ice in the continent's heart. He was a conqueror, a butcher, a tyrant whose shadow had fallen over Elian's world and extinguished its light. From this distance, Kale was more monolith than man. Broad-shouldered, draped in black furs and dark leather, he seemed carved from the very mountain his fortress was built upon. The crown on his head was not gold and jewels, but a circlet of jagged, interlocking iron, like a trap waiting to spring. Elian could feel the king's gaze on him, a physical weight pressing down, demanding fealty he would never truly give. "State your purpose," Kale's voice commanded. It wasn't a shout, it was worse. A low, resonant rumble that vibrated through the stone, through Elian's bones, promising annihilation with chilling calm. Elian lifted his head, forcing a tremor into his hands, widening his eyes with manufactured terror. He had practiced this face in the cracked reflection of a frozen puddle until the desperation looked real. "Alpha King," he began, his voice a carefully pitched whisper, full of broken hope. "I am Elian of the fallen Sunwood Pack. My Alpha is dead. My family, they are all that remain. I come to offer myself in exchange for their lives. A tribute, a convenience, whatever you wish." The lie was bitter on his tongue. Sunwood Pack, a fiction. His true pack, the Silver Moon, was not fallen, it was dust, slaughtered, erased by this very man's decree. And his family was not waiting for his sacrifice. They were ghosts whose screams still echoed in his sleep. This offering was not an act of surrender. It was the first step of a blade's long journey toward the king's heart. A ripple of murmurs passed through the court, and Omega, offering himself so publicly. It was a desperate, final gambit. Kale was known for his cruelty, but also for his pragmatism. Such a tribute could be a useful tool, a symbol of his absolute dominion. The scent of the room was a suffocating blend of perfumes and anxiety, but it all vanished beneath the king's presence. Kale's scent rolled off the dais in an oppressive wave. Ozone before a lightning strike, the cold bite of steel, and beneath it all, something deeply, terrifyingly primal. Pine needles crushed underfoot in a winter forest. The raw, untamed musk of a dominant wolf. It was a scent designed to bring lesser men to their knees, and Elian's own wolf, chained and hidden deep within him, snarled in silent defiance. Kale rose. The motion was unnervingly fluid for a man his size. He descended the steps, the heavy tread of his boots the only sound in the cavernous hall. He stopped directly in front of Elian, close enough that the heat radiating from his body was a tangible force. Elian kept his head bowed, his neck exposed in the ultimate gesture of trust, or in his case, the ultimate deception. He felt the king's shadow fall over him completely. A large hand, gloved in black leather, reached out. Elian flinched, a genuine reaction that pleased him. Let the monster see fear. Let him believe his power was absolute. He braced himself for the touch, for the claiming grip on his hair or the rough hand on his jaw that would seal his fate. He was ready to endure it, to swallow the violation like poison and let it fuel the fire of his revenge. The hand hovered, then settled not on his face, but on his shoulder. The grip was firm, unyielding, yet it held no overt cruelty. Kale's thumb traced the line of his collarbone through the thin tunic. The touch was analytical, assessing. "You offer yourself," Kale stated, his voice now a low murmur meant only for Elian. The scent of pine and winter intensified, sharp and clear. "You believe your life is a worthy trade for others." "I do, Alpha King," Elian whispered, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Silence stretched, thin and taut. Kale circled him, a predator inspecting its prey. Elian could feel the gazes of the entire court burning into his back. This was the moment. The king would accept his offering, drag him to his chambers, and make him a spoil of war. It was what everyone expected. It was the foundation of Elian's plan. But Cale stopped behind him. He did not touch him again. Instead, he spoke to the room. This Omega has shown courage. He has offered his freedom for the safety of his kin. Such loyalty is a rare commodity. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. It should not be squandered in a bedchamber. Elian's blood ran cold. What? He will not be my consort, Cale declared, his voice ringing with authority. He will be my personal attendant. He will serve me, and he will remain by my side. His life is now mine, and his loyalty will be to me. As long as he serves well, his family will remain unharmed. A collective, stunned silence fell over the court. Elian's mind reeled. Attendant? Not a bed warmer, not a conquest, but an attendant? The plan, so carefully constructed, shattered into 1,000 pieces. He was supposed to be in the king's bed, a position of intimate access, a place where a man was at his most vulnerable. Not a glorified servant, always in sight, but never truly close. Before he could process the shift, Cale moved back in front of him. In his hand was a collar. It wasn't the jeweled, ostentatious kind worn by favored consorts. It was a simple, thin band of polished silver, unadorned and severe. It looked less like an ornament and more like a restraint. Kneel, Cale commanded softly. Elian's body obeyed before his mind could rebel. Cale leaned down, and the scent of him was overwhelming. Pine, cold air, and something else, something that smelled like absolute possession. The king's fingers, now bare, were calloused but surprisingly gentle as they parted Elian's hair. The silver was cold against his skin as Cale fastened the collar around his neck. It clicked shut with a soft, final sound. It was not a mark of favor. It was a leash. Rise, Cale said, his voice devoid of emotion. Your duties begin now. The days that followed were a special kind of hell, a cage of quiet observation. Elian's chambers were not the lavish suite of a royal favorite, but a stark, functional room adjoining the king's own. It had a bed, a wash basin, and a single, barred window that overlooked the frozen expanse of the northern peaks. The silver collar was a constant, cool weight on his skin, a reminder of his new, unforeseen servitude. His duties were as mundane as they were maddening. He brought Cale his morning tea. He stood silently behind his chair during council meetings, a living shadow that no one dared acknowledge. He organized the endless stream of military reports and diplomatic missives that crossed the king's desk. He was a ghost in the machine of Cale's reign, granted a proximity that was both a curse and a twisted blessing. He was close enough to see everything. He saw the way Cale's jaw tightened when his generals spoke of raising villages. He saw the king discreetly reroute grain shipments to a famine-stricken territory he had only just conquered. He saw the exhaustion that carved lines around his eyes late at night when the court was gone and the crown was set aside. The man was a paradox. He was the ruthless Alpha King who had ordered the execution of Elian's entire bloodline, yet he governed with a heavy, solitary sense of duty that Elian could not deny. The image of the slavering monster he had cultivated in his mind began to fray at the edges, replaced by something far more complex and dangerous, a man. The hatred was still there, a hot coal in his chest, but it was now complicated by a grudging, infuriating flicker of understanding. And something else, an instinctual pull he fought with every fiber of his being. He was an Omega, or so Cale and the world believed, and the sheer, oppressive power of the Alpha King's presence was a constant, low-level thrum against his senses. The scent he had once found so terrifying, that sharp, clean scent of pine in winter, now sometimes felt grounding, a fixed point in the dizzying turmoil of his deception. One evening, Elian was laying out Cale's dinner in his private study. The king was working, bent over a map, his brow furrowed in concentration. The silence was comfortable, familiar, too familiar. You are quiet, Cale observed, not looking up. I am here to serve, not to speak, your majesty, Elian replied, his voice a perfect mask of deference. Cale finally lifted his gaze. His eyes were the color of a stormy sky, gray and intense. They seemed to see more than Elian was showing. You watch me. You think I don't notice. Your eyes follow my every move. What are you looking for? Elian's heart stuttered. I am only being attentive to your needs. No, Kale said, leaning back in his chair. The leather creaked. It's more than that. You watch me like a wolf watches a trap it is considering stepping into. You are looking for a weakness. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and deadly. Elian's carefully constructed composure threatened to crack. He could feel the blood draining from his face. This was it. He had been discovered. But Kale's expression wasn't angry. It was curious. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Sit. It was a command. Elian sat, his spine rigid. The Sunwood Pack, Kale said slowly, his eyes never leaving Elian's. I have read the reports on their surrender. A small, agrarian pack. No warriors of note. And yet, you carry yourself like a soldier. You stand for hours without shifting your weight. Your hands, though you try to hide it, are calloused. You are no simple Omega farmer's son. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Elian's control. He had been so careful. My life was hard before I came here. I'm sure it was, Kale said, his voice a low growl. He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the desk. The space between them crackled with tension. What is it you truly want, Elian? You offered your body, but your eyes promise only violence. You wear a collar of submission, but your spirit chafes against it like a wild thing in a cage. What are you? Each word was a hammer blow. Elian's carefully hidden wolf, the powerful, ancient beast of his lineage, stirred in its sleep, roused by the direct challenge from a true alpha. He had to quell the snarl that rose in his throat. Before he could formulate a response, an alarm bell began to toll, a frantic, clanging rhythm that shattered the night's peace. Shouts erupted from the corridor. Kale was on his feet in an instant, his entire demeanor shifting from contemplative ruler to apex predator. Stay here, he commanded, grabbing the sword that always rested by his desk. But the doors to the study burst open. 3 figures, clad in black and masked, stormed in. Assassins. Their movements were swift, professional. Their target was obvious. Everything slowed down. Elian saw the glint of poisoned steel. He saw Kale pivot to meet the first attacker. He saw the second and third fan out, moving to flank him. It was a well-executed trap. Kale could handle 2, but not all 3. This was his chance. The perfect opportunity. He could stand back, let it happen, and his revenge would be complete. Kale would die, and Elian would have orchestrated it by simply doing nothing. The ghosts of his family screamed for him to let them fall. But his body moved before his mind could choose. As the third assassin lunged for Kale's exposed back, Elian reacted. He didn't think. He acted. He grabbed the heavy silver platter from the dinner tray and threw himself forward, slamming it into the side of the assassin's head with a sickening crack. The man crumpled. The sudden intervention threw off the attacker's rhythm. Kale dispatched the first with brutal efficiency and spun to face the second. The element of surprise was gone. Elian, armed with nothing but a platter and a surge of adrenaline, found himself facing the second assassin. The man sneered behind his mask and lunged. Instinct took over. Elian dropped the platter and moved, his body remembering years of training he had tried so hard to forget. He sidestepped the blade, his hand shooting out to grip the man's wrist, twisting it at an unnatural angle. A bone snapped. The assassin screamed as Elian used his momentum to drive him into the wall. In the chaos, the small, sophisticated device tucked into the lining of his tunic, the one that masked his true scent, was crushed against the wall. It failed with a faint hiss. And the air changed. For a split second, as Kale ran the final assassin through, the cloying, sweet scent of a submissive Omega that had always clung to Elian vanished. It was replaced by something else. Something wild and electric. The scent of ozone after a storm, of wet earth, of silver moonlight on snow. It was a scent of ancient power, of a lineage thought long dead. The scent of a silver moon wolf. Kale froze, his sword dripping blood onto the priceless rug. He turned slowly, his storm gray eyes wide with shock. His alpha senses, honed to a razor's edge, were reeling. The scent filled the room, calling to his own wolf not as a subordinate, but as an equal. A challenge. A missing piece of a puzzle he never knew existed. He stared at Elian, who was breathing heavily, his knuckles bruised, his carefully crafted mask of fragility utterly obliterated. What? Kale breathed, the word a mix of awe and disbelief. Are you? The bodies of the assassins lay cooling on the floor. The alarm bells had finally ceased, replaced by the heavy tread of the royal guard securing the corridors. But inside the study, the silence was a living entity, thick with revelation. Cale took a step toward him, his sword forgotten in his hand. That scent. Elian's control shattered. The grief, the rage, the sheer exhaustion of his long deception came crashing down. "You know the scent," he snarled, his voice no longer a deferential whisper but a raw, ragged growl. The sound was foreign in the quiet room, the first note of a truth he could no longer contain. He reached up, his fingers fumbling with the clasp of the silver collar. It felt like a brand, a symbol of a lie he refused to wear a moment longer. With a sharp tug, he ripped it from his neck and threw it to the floor. It clattered against the marble, a sound of finality. "I am the vengeance you earned," he said, his eyes burning with unshed tears. "I am the ghost of the pack you ground into dust. My name is not Elian of Sunwood. I am Elian of the Silver Moon, and you murdered my family." The confession, raw and brutal, hung between them. Cale's face, usually an impenetrable mask of command, was stripped bare. Shock, confusion, and something that looked terrifyingly like regret warred in his expression. "The Silver Moon Pack," Cale whispered, the name an echo from a history lesson. "They were extinct, wiped out in the Elder Wars. A lie told to make you forget we ever existed." Elian's voice cracked. "We lived in seclusion. We harmed no one. But your predecessor feared our power, and you finished his work. You signed the decree. I saw it. Your name. Your seal. You sentenced my mother, my father, my little sister to death based on a lie." He was trembling, not with fear, but with a grief so profound it was a physical force. The image of Cale as a complex man, a burdened ruler, evaporated, replaced once more by the monster from his nightmares. Cale stared at him, at the fury and pain radiating from him, and then at the assassins on the floor. A terrible understanding began to dawn in his eyes. He looked at the sigil subtly embossed on the hilt of one of the fallen men's daggers, a coiled serpent eating its own tail. The mark of Lord Valerius, his most trusted advisor. The very advisor who had brought him the intelligence about a resurgent, dangerous cult practicing dark magic in the Silver Moon territories. The advisor who had urged their complete and utter annihilation for the good of the kingdom. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Valerius, who coveted the throne. Valerius, who had fed him a lie to eliminate a pack with an ancient claim to the lands he now controlled. Valerius, who had just tried to kill him. The king looked back at Elian, and for the first time, Elian saw not a tyrant, but a man caught in a web he hadn't realized was being woven around him. The cruelty he had projected onto Cale had been a tool, wielded by another. "The decree." Cale's voice was hoarse. "The intelligence I was given, it spoke of blood rituals, of a threat to the entire region." "Lies," Elian choked out. "My father was a healer. My mother a lore master. We were guardians, not monsters." The weight of the truth settled upon Cale. The slaughter of the Silver Moon Pack was not a necessary act of a king securing his borders. It was murder, orchestrated by a traitor. And this boy, this powerful, grieving wolf standing before him, was the living consequence of his gravest error. The guilt was a physical blow, heavier than any crown. He dropped his sword. It clanged against the floor, a sound of surrender. He took a slow step forward, his hands open and empty. Elian instinctively tensed, his body coiling, ready to fight to the death. "You saved my life," Cale said, his voice quiet, raw, "when you should have let me die." It was instinct. Elian spat, though even he wasn't sure if that was the whole truth. "No," Cale said, stopping a few feet away. The air between them was electric, thick with the intermingled scents of pine and moonlight, of Alpha and the one he had wronged. It was honor, an honor I did not deserve. He looked at the discarded collar on the floor, then back at Elian's bare neck. The rage in Elian's eyes was still there, but beneath it, Cale could see the profound sorrow of a lone wolf, the last of his kind. "Your revenge is justified," Cale stated, his gaze unwavering. "You can have it. If you wish to kill me, do it now. I will not stop you." The offer was so unexpected it stole the breath from Elian's lungs. This was it, the moment he had dreamed of. The king, vulnerable and exposed. But the clean, righteous fire of his vengeance was now muddied, complicated by the night's revelations. Killing Cale wouldn't bring back his family, and it would leave the true serpent, Valerius, free to seize the throne. A new path unfolded in his mind, one paved not with cold vengeance, but with hot, righteous justice. Killing you is too easy, Elian said, his voice gaining a new, hard strength. It lets the man who destroyed my family win. I don't want your death. I want his. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps even hope, ignited in Cale's stormy eyes. The power dynamic, once so absolute, had irrevocably shifted. They were no longer king and servant, alpha and omega, conqueror and victim. They were two wolves who had been played by the same hand, bound together by a shared enemy. Cale bent down, but he did not pick up his sword. Instead, his fingers closed around the cold silver of the discarded collar. He held it for a moment, then extended it to Elian, not as a restraint, but as an offering, an apology, a promise. Valerius will pay for what he did to your pack, and for his treason against the crown, Cale vowed, his voice resonating with the full weight of his authority. He wanted to erase the silver moon. Instead, he brought one roaring back to my very door. He met Elian's gaze, and the chasm between them began to close. Hunt with me, Elian of the silver moon. Help me deliver the justice your family deserves. Not as my attendant, as my equal. Elian looked at the hand offered to him, at the Alpha King who was no longer just a monster, and at the path of retribution that lay before them. The scent of pine and winter air no longer felt like a threat, but a promise of a storm to come. He did not take the collar, but he met the king's gaze and, for the first time, gave a slow, deliberate nod. The hunt was on,